All right, so we're going to talk real numbers here, but before doing that, we've talked on the income side. Let's talk expenses.
Okay, so expenses, we all know taxes are one of the greatest expenses you're going to have for any multifamily property, and it is terribly important for you to know what's happening in Cook County, assuming that you're buying something in Chicago. We just had our triennial, and the assessments came back much, much higher than we thought they were going to be, or hoped that they were going to be. And the tax bills came out in the last couple of weeks, so you should know where your taxes are. As a buyer, you need to figure out where you believe taxes are going to be. I encourage you to talk to a tax professional. As a broker, I'm constantly talking to different tax professionals to try to figure out where I can make my best guess on where taxes are going to be the following year, especially if it's one of the years where they're going to change up the assessments drastically, which was this past year. We were always using 15 to 17%. But I mean, you'll see taxes for buildings anywhere between 10 and I've seen some taxes that are even 20%. And when I say percent, I'm saying a percent of your gross income on the building.
So if your gross rents for the entire year are $100,000, it's safe to assume taxes, 15 to 18K, somewhere in that range is a good baseline.
Right. And it does, especially if it's more than a 5-unit building.
Yep. And then obviously, guys, if you're increasing your rents, you can't not increase that side of the equation as well.
And that's something that we didn't even talk about. But when you're looking at a long-term model, when you're trying to value buildings, you have to look at income growth and expense growth, and you have to have a percentage there, and have to figure out, do you think expense growth is going to be greater than income growth or rent growth? And everybody has different opinions on that. I usually think they're roughly the same, but as a broker, I'm always a little optimistic and put my expense growth at maybe 3% and my rent growth at 3.25%, 3.5%. But then I have my tax growth because of the way things have happened in the last couple of years, really last 5 years in Cook County. I think my real estate tax growth rate is 5% minimum.
So. For the triannual year, when you're doing deals, are you looking at the taxes different, or are your deals, your OM, are they different based on it being that year versus maybe next year will be, you got another 2-year window?
So next year, I think it'll be a lot easier to just slap in a 5% tax growth rate on it and just say, hey, look, your taxes were $20,000 this year. Next year, they're going to be $21,000. Last year, it was really anyone's game. You can look at a bunch of different OMs from brokers within the same brokerage or brokers from across brokerages, and you're going to see a lot of different answers. What I tried to do was look at the assessment for 2021 because those came out already. And then I applied the tax rate and the same equalizer from last year to try to calculate, like, all right, if your assessments went up 75%, then I'm going to put in a 75% growth on your taxes and your actual tax bill. And knowing that was probably a little too conservative because, and as it happened, the tax rate did go down. And so, if you had a 75% bump in your assessment, you probably only had maybe a 30% bump in your taxes, which is still enormous, but that's exactly how I did it. And it's better than getting pushback. For every buyer is going to be doing the same thing. So they're going to look at me. And if I put in a tax number that's really low, people are going to ignore
it. Before going further, we're talking about these in generalities here. Is there any difference here for anybody that's buying maybe a C or D class building versus A or B class for anything we've talked about so far?
In my experience, the C or D class buildings will be taxed at a little bit lower rate. Usually they're just maybe in need of repairs, haven't been traded more as recently. And so their tax bill is maybe at like 10%. I even have one that I'm closing on in a couple of weeks that's, I think, currently at 9% of its gross income. And A and B class buildings are typically closer to that 16 to 18%. So there is a little bit there that I've seen.
Cool. What are some of the other hard costs, Rick?
So hard costs, both basically the way I view it is hard costs are ones that broker doesn't have to play around with. Like, hey, this is your utility costs, your gas, your electric, your water, scavenger, third-party costs. Third-party is in contract services. If you have trash pickup, recycling, landscaping, snow removal, these costs we put in actuals, and those are less likely to change greatly depending on the operator, right? Just because Tom takes over a building, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to somehow magically reduce the gas bill from the boiler, right? It's just not going to happen. So those you can be pretty confident in. The soft costs, when you see, and at least when I do my underwriting, I have a little 1 next to some of these expenses, and that just indicates broker pro forma. And this is really where we make our estimates, right? And it's tough because it depends on the building, but I'm looking at management, I'm looking at maintenance, repairs, decorating costs, which is basically the cost of turning over a unit after it goes, when you have a change in tenant. And then reserves, depending on how much you want to keep in your operating reserves to handle any capital improvements that need to get done. But I mean, those vary wildly on different buildings. I mean, if I'm looking at again, I keep going back to a 6 flat because I think that's, something that the audience here is going to be interested in. A 6 flat, if Tom, you're a pretty handy guy, are you going to be handling the management yourself? Are you going to be fixing some of the plumbing issues? Can you handle tuck pointing? I don't know. What can't you do, and what do you want to do?
Just because I'm wearing a hoodie doesn't mean I'm handy. Let's broker making a wrong assumption there.
Yeah, well, that happens. But okay, I make 1,000 assumptions a day. I can be wrong. Much as the weatherman.
No, but to go down that route, like, how much of your time, how much experience do you have? How much time are you willing to give up? I think a big one too, people don't talk about leasing. They end up not leasing the unit. They have a turnover cost. They have a vacancy. They have to pay that guy or girl a half month. They had, that eats you up, man. That's a big number if that's the route you're going to go to get your time back.
Right. And so on a 6 flat, a lot of owner operators will do the leasing themselves, right? It's just, it cost effective. It makes sense. And it's not if you align your leases to end in summer, or like it's a narrowing window of when the leasing season is right now. But if you can get your leases to turn, I would say May, June, July, you're going to be able to lease those units on your own fairly easily, I hope, opposed to needing to hire an agent and pay them half a month. If you have I have a 140 unit building on the market right now that's new construction, and no one is going to be leasing that. No one's buying that building and saying, I'll handle the leasing for 100 plus units, right? So there you have to build in your, leasing and marketing, right? You're going to have different line items for the different types of buildings. And it will be significantly more expensive to operate a building like that.
Do you run the OMs though? As most banks, lenders will look at building a management fee in their building that leasing commission, because you might not be able to do it all the time. If Tom in his 6 flat, Tom moves away, then he has to hire somebody. His property still has to be profitable at those, call it worst case expense ratios. He's just not paying himself, is where he's saving the money. Do you typically run it that way?
And so and that's the same thing. Like I have to, lenders are going to underwrite to be conservative. They want to make sure that their investment is safe, and brokers are going to be a little bit more aggressive. I still put in 5% vacancy. I put in 5% management, even though most of my clients, when I talk to them after a year or 2 years of managing a building, that, someone Tom works with always tells me that he keeps his buildings at 2% vacancy, right? But when he's buying a building, it's 5% vacancy because that's how a lender is going to operate. Same thing with management. It depends. I'm going to put in 5% management. If it's a 6 flat, I might kick that up to 7%, depending on the neighborhood. I also might remove the janitorial fee, right? How do I think? And this is, for me, it's always, is just because one person will keep their expenses really light, the next guy might look at it and he might be buying and living, let's say he lives on the West Coast and he's buying this building because he likes Chicago, but he's paying management, he's paying a janitor, he's paying for all of these other fees that he's not doing any of the management or really asset management himself. So it's going to be a lot more expensive for that person to run the building. I try to find kind of a happy medium, a blended average of what everyone's going to do. And I'm going to constantly get yelled at by everybody looking at the building telling me I'm wrong. And that's okay, because I just have to go kind of down the middle. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I dig it. Again, I'll just chime in my 2 cents here is you can make the best guesses possible. And the more you do, the better this gets, because you have data. You can see how this other 6 unit performed for you over the last 2 years, right? But when you're buying that first one, everyone wants to be like, well, is maintenance 5% or 7%? And like, the world doesn't work that way, right? Like if you go to a Cubs game and they average 4 runs a game, they might score 4 that day. They might score 0. They might score 12. They might score 9. It's, when you have just one building, within a standard deviation, there's a lot that could happen there. Right. So you make your best guess estimate, but like, it's not a golden rule that things fit nicely into some little percent of your gross income. Like the world just does not work that way.
And Tom, if I could add to that, I think that's a great example also for how you want to handle another one of your expenses, which is your reserves. Reserves are there to pay for problems that arise or to do capital improvements that you're expecting. But you buy a building and you see the boiler is 20 years old. That thing may shut down the next day. It may last another 10 years. But you can factor in, like, I'm going to have to replace a boiler. I'm going to have to replace a roof. I'm going to have to do tuck pointing every couple of years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever you choose to do. And so how do you put that into your reserve budget, right? You may score 4 runs one day and 20 the next, unless you're the Cubs.
Yeah, but when you have more units, like those numbers do start to become true because you have enough, you have enough sample size. Whereas that one building, everyone's looking at their 1-3 unit being like, is my maintenance this? And it's like, well, it's an impossible question.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
I understand where you're coming from and I understand you want to get this right, but it's not, the world does not work that way.
Well, I think it flows into your management style too. If you're going to be an aggressive property manager and run thin, or if you're going to be, you got to live in one of the units and you want to keep everyone happy, like your expenses and your maintenance are going to charge back tenants. One building, you could have a guy that's got 5% and a guy that's got 14%, like maintenance, like literally because of the way they actually operated or the way that's their style. Maybe that now, don't get me wrong. The guy that spends 14%, maybe he makes it up in his lack of turnover. His average lease is 52 months versus 36 months. So those are all things that come into play too, when you got to make the decision. So
I would add to that, Mark, in that when you have a lot of capital improvements that you're going to make in the next 10 years, let's say you're buying a 6-flat and you know that it needs a new roof, or you know that you need to put in new cabinets and new appliances and all that. A lot of clients of mine will say, you know what, I'm going to put all of those capital costs, I'm going to do that right away because I'm going to be spending that money now, or I'm going to be spending that money in the next 10 years. And if I do it now, then I'm going to be reducing my turnover because people will actually like to stay there longer. And it's just a strategy, right? And everybody has different strategies. So it's really challenging to make these assumptions and know that you're right.
Can we go back to utilities real fast? Especially in these boiler buildings, if you get a $50 common area electric bill or $50 gas bill, like that's not a big deal. That's not where you could be 100% off and really not screw up your pro forma. But where you're paying you're paying for the entire building, you're paying either baseboard heating or you're paying with a boiler. Where, as a broker, are you getting that information? Are you getting the actual hard statements from owners? And I guess second part of that question is, where can buyers get like real information when it comes to trying to explore their own numbers and verify?
So, yeah, if I see that there's a huge gas bill in a building, I know that it's a boiler building. I know that they're paying for heat, right? I know that it's not HVAC. And then I have to go to the building, right? Anytime I'm underwriting a property, I won't underwrite a property unless I can tour it and see the actual mechanicals. But I don't know how someone can independently verify a gas bill other than you go through your due diligence and you look at the gas bills for the last couple of years and see how it's operating. I mean, my pro forma typically when I'm saying, okay, the gas bill for this 4+1 which is $25,000 to heat 40 units. And next year I'm going to assume a 3% bump just because that's what I'm going to assume. I can't say that a new owner is going to change that. Does that make sense? Unless I know that they're going to remove the boiler and put in individual HVAC, then that's a capital expense that I have to underwrite for. Then I have a post renovation and it's a completely different column.
I know. Do you ever refer people? We could put the links into, I try pulling up real fast, but People's Gas and 𝗍𝗁𝗃, so 𝗍𝗁𝗃 in the suburbs, they have some sort of 12-month past history that people can pull up to be able to estimate. So maybe we can pop that link in there as well too.
I didn't know that they were willing to share that for specific buildings. That's awesome. Yeah,
the Realtor Association in the MLS listings, they used to have it where you could, as a seller, put your account number in there and do that. That went away. I don't know for what reason, if it was political, but yeah, it's just, we'll add that in there, that calculator.